part two of The Boyfriend starts off with George returning to the unemployment office after the unfortunate events at the end of him running out of the bathroom with his pants down. Um, and his plan with Vandelay Industries unfortunately did not work, as Kramer was the one who would answer the phone. So Mrs. Sokol was trying to get George to sign off that his benefits and such have been terminated under unemployment. George then sees a photo, though, of Mrs. Sokol's daughter, who was played by Carol Ann Susi. Those who don't know who Carol Ann Susi is, if you're a fan of The Big Bang Theory, Howard, get that door! Yes, that's right. The same woman who played Howard Wolfowitz's mother, Debbie Wolfowitz. She was never seen on camera. It was just the voice. You just heard her voice. You never saw her on camera, though. She played Mrs. Sokol's daughter, Carrie, which George then basically says he finds her breathtaking and such, and because he was interested in his daughter, her daughter, Mrs. Sokol, didn't have George sign off on his terminating his unemployment benefits. Basically, she was giving him the extension for taking her daughter out on a date. Meanwhile, Jerry, of course, goes with Kramer to the Hamptons to see the baby. You gotta see the baby, which Jerry obviously does not care at all. So and then the couple wanted to take a photo of Jerry holding the baby, but then Kramer was to pick up the baby. I guess he dropped the baby and hurt the baby, and so obviously Kramer's not meant to be holding babies. But again, that story was really pointless. But to me, I feel like it was just a filler story, just to have an excuse for Jerry doing something different. As Keith and Elaine went out on a date the night that Jerry was supposed to go to see JFK with Keith. So at the end of the night, first off, it was George and Carrie in George's car. And Carrie says she had a great night. It had been a long time since she had a Big Mac, so obviously their date was going to McDonald's. A cheap date and a very lazy date that obviously George was going through the motions because he really didn't care. He was just trying to find some way for him to get his unemployment benefits extended. Carrie invited him in, but George said he wasn't able to. He had something with a hardware store the next day. He was trying to get a job with the hardware people. Well, of course, then she says, "Will you promise to call me when you get home?" So then she goes in for a kiss, but George was like, "No thanks, I'm good." Meanwhile, Elaine was having a ball with Keith, sitting there with all these other ball players, talking about Game 6 of the World Series. And, of course, Jerry didn't want to bring that on so quickly, but Elaine brought on quickly, which the character of Elaine supposedly didn't know a heck of a lot about baseball, but apparently in real life, Julia Louis-Dreyfus apparently was actually in attendance for real at the Game 6 that they're referring to with the Mets. But she had a great time, and then they were in the car when Keith was driving Elaine home, and it was kind of like the same thing with Jerry wondering if he should shake his hand. Keith and Elaine are like, "Gosh, should I kiss her? He's gonna kiss me." Keith and like Jerry, who said, "Come on, I'm Jerry Seinfeld. I was on the Tonight Show." Keith was like, "Come on, I'm a baseball player. Damn it, I won the MVP in '79. I can do whatever I want." And then they just had like an awkward chit chat until they finally shared a kiss. In which the next day, Elaine, when Jerry was like, "Did you guys, I think he was trying to imply, did you guys, get intimate or whatnot?" But Jerry said, "Did he kiss you goodnight?" And he's like, "Okay, yes, he kissed me." What was it? Was it a peck? What is it? Was it a kiss? Was it a makeout? And Elaine goes, "Between a peck and a makeout." Like, "So you like him? You really like him? This and that. Like, who are you?" And at first, and Elaine asked him, "Wait, are you jealous of him or are you jealous of me?" And he goes, "I'm jealous of everyone." Which I was even like, holy smokes! Like why is Jerry still? Why would Jerry be jealous of Keith if him and Elaine, agreed it didn't work as a romantic couple anymore. Later in the episode, though, Jerry said something to George of he never thought Elaine. It was the first time that Elaine really met someone that she liked more than she ever liked him. Basically, said, but that was kind of like a blow off thing. But Jerry was just more so jealous that Elaine was obviously getting Keith was distracted by Elaine to pay attention to Jerry. But then the awkward part comes where Keith calls Jerry and asks him to help him move. And they're treating it as oh my gosh, it's like a big step up in the relationship here and whatnot. And this and that, again, going back to the whole thing, making it seem like it was like Jerry was dating a guy, basically, from what it looked like. But they were just friends, but Jerry was just, very excited to be friends with one of the favorite ball players of all time. Of course, everybody's telling him, you're crazy for doing this. And then it starts to jag of you're not going to drive him to the airport. I'm not driving him to the airport. So then, I guess they both George and Carrie, and then Elaine and Keith have another date. Carrie dumps George at the end of the night, telling him that she doesn't want to be with a guy who's basically a bum, but George is begging her not to say anything to her mother. Which also, fun fact, apparently I didn't notice this, but Carol Ann Susie in that scene was wearing the same mohair sweater that was worn in the Sniffling Accountant in an upcoming episode that caused all the sniffing that happened in that episode. But obviously she did say something because of what happened in the next scene. Well, later in the episode. And then Elaine and Keith were out on a date. They were having a great time just, bragging about things. And, of course, Keith said about how he won 11 gold gloves. And then Elaine didn't come up. She goes, besides, you played first base. Everybody sucks at first base. She goes, first base. I was put at first base and I sucked. And then Keith starts this little joke, which Julia Louis-Dreyfus said she enjoyed playing this scene with Keith. Keith actually said, because people would ask him, how was it kissing Elaine? He goes, it was awful. It was 8 takes. It was just, it was not a good scene for him, he said. But Julia Louis-Dreyfus said she loved this scene with Keith where he was he was like, Elaine, the first thing about first base. And Elaine says, there's something about getting to first base, and I think you're going to be getting there tonight. And then he says, well, Elaine, I've already gotten to first base, and I plan on rounding second tonight at around 11 o'clock. And I'm like, ooh, so he wants to put a little more than just the peck and the makeout on there with Elaine. But then Elaine says, well, I'd watch the third base coach because I don't think he's waving you in. And then, of course, they're like, I think we're really hitting this off. And then a second later, bam, it's over because Keith pulls out a pack of cigarettes. And earlier, of course, in part 1, when they were in the at Monk's, when Jerry was whining that Keith had not called him, Elaine tossed an ashtray to his house. She hates cigarettes, and we also got a glimpse of that in the Suicide, a couple episodes we talked about when Rulo was smoking, and Elaine just voiced her displeasure again for cigarettes. True story, though, Keith Hernandez in real life did smoke about 2 packs a day, but it was not long after this episode aired was when he quit smoking. But of course, Elaine dumps him because she's not a fan of smokers, and she didn't know that Keith smoked. But of course, Jerry thinks they're still in love, and then he, of course, went there discussing with George about the whole moving thing. So George was going to go to the unemployment office. Jerry was going back to his apartment to meet Keith to help him move. So first, George goes to the unemployment office, and of course, obviously, with things going south with him and Carrie, Mrs. Sokol is now having him resign, have his benefits terminated. But then he notices there was a baseball, and Mrs. Sokol says she's a huge fan of the Mets. So he bribes her again, saying, I happen to be good friends with Keith Hernandez. She's like, yeah, I don't believe you. He goes, I can get you Keith Hernandez right here within the hour. She's like, you're on. And then George is just like, yeah, I'm just going to go find my good pal Keith. And again, he runs for it, but this time he played cautious. He ran to the phone trying to call Jerry to get them to have Keith come down to the unemployment office. But of course, there was a big, construction worker right there, and he's like, I learned my lesson last time. And then he rushes to get a cab, but he gets into the same cab driver that beat the crap out of him when George kept telling him how to drive. So George had to run for his life, find some way to get back all the way back to Jerry's apartment before Keith left. Meanwhile, Keith arrived. He's explained everything to Jerry, and Jerry's just getting more and more uncomfortable. And finally, he just calls it off. He's like, I can't help you move. I can't do this. I don't know you. I just met you. It's too soon. I can't do this. I just can't. He just breaks down. Kramer came in meantime and went, except a little bit faster than that. Of course, I didn't want to smack my knees off like the bed or the TV stand and whatnot. And he's waiting for Keith to recognize him. He does not. So then Kramer tells him, I still remember you. He's like, I should? He goes, yes. Let me refresh your memory. Newman makes a super dramatic entrance going, June 14th, 1987. And again, the same thing, this. And then they basically just sum up, basically said, you made a big error, cost the Mets a game. And then we were coming up the parking lot ramp, and then Keith cuts him off and said, you're the one who said, nice game, pretty boy. And Kramer's like, you remember now. And then Newman goes, and then you spit on us. And then Keith said, no, it wasn't me. I didn't spit at you. And Kramer was, well, who was it then? So then Keith tells his side of the story. He describes it as he was walking up the ramp. And again, this is me literally quoting this because I can remember some of these scenes word for word. But Keith said he was walking up the ramp. He was upset about the game. And that's when he had walked past Kramer and Newman called him Pretty Boy. Which, of course, ticked Keith off, and he turned around to say something back. But as he turned around, he had seen Roger McDowell, former star pitcher for Major League Baseball, of course, over in the bushes, over by the gravelly road. Well, Roger was talking to someone from the top of the hill on the gravelly road by the fence, and he was pointing at Kramer and Newman. And then he went to spit, and then Keith tried to sort of scream out to give him a heads up, but it was too late. The spit was on its way. And then the culprit again was Roger McDowell. Now, originally, though, Keith, in an interview for the Inside Look, according to Keith Hernandez, originally the second spitter was going to be Mets outfielder Darryl Strawberry. He was supposed to be the second spitter. But at the time, of course, we all know Darryl Strawberry had some bad publicity, and, he had some, drug issues and whatnot. And even though Keith and Darryl were both very good friends, he was honest and told the writers, I don't think right now with his bad publicity, it'd be a good time for Darryl to be spitting on fans. So instead, he called up his other good friend, Roger McDowell, who at the time this episode was filmed was the Dodgers. And back in 1987, though, McDowell was with the Phillies. So they called him in, and they filled in the story of Kramer and Newman saying that that McDowell probably did that because the two of them were cursing at them in the bullpen during the game, and then Newman poured a beer on his head or something like that. So they apologized to Keith, and Keith, said, no, don't worry about it, guys, don't worry about it. And then he obviously knows again that Jerry backed out, so he goes, I gotta get going, I gotta move. And then Kramer and Newman then offer to help him, and Jerry's like, oh boy. So as they leave, Elaine calls, and basically Elaine tells Jerry she broke up with Keith because of smoking, and Jerry's like, I broke up with him too. He just said I wasn't ready to go forward with what we're going with, basically. And then I guess they made plans to meet in like 30 minutes. But of course, in running comes George, screaming out, needing to find Keith. Keith just left. He's yelling out the window saying, Keith, I need you to come to the unemployment office with me. I'm Jerry's friend. I'm the chucker. But he just had nothing to do with it, and he left. Now, I forgot to mention also, there's two things I have to mention. First off, Carol Ann Susie also called George Biff, comparing to that Biff, whatever that person was who was very picky about stuff, that Jerry compared George, but compared to George who's starting the subway. But Carrie even called him Biff also. But George sits down and he goes, well, Biff, what's next? And he goes, I don't know. And earlier in part 2, though, there was this when they were in Monks, and Jerry was talking about, the how Elaine and Keith really like each other, but how he was also freaked out about helping Keith move. George also mentions that one of his plans was to have sex with a tall woman, to sleep with a giant. Well, in from Jerry's apartment comes a very tall woman, and she said that George had dropped his wallet, which George just smiles big time, and that's how the episode airs. In an alternate ending, though, they have the woman saying, "Is there a reward?" And George goes, "Nah, there is not, but thank you, though." And as she walks out, Jerry's like put his hands like, "Are you kidding me?" And he goes, "Her, not my type, no." But I also thought of that back in the subway when George went to the hotel with that scam woman, and she was taller than him. I'm thinking, well, George, you're getting your wish, but he had not mentioned the wish yet at the time. But yeah, that's the Keith Hernandez episode. That's the boyfriend, the new friend. Definitely one of the best episodes in Seinfeld. It's Jerry's personal favorite. I enjoy one because not just I love Seinfeld, but I also love baseball. But the JFK stuff, and all that, it's just an excellent episode. Again, it's definitely one of the best ones in the series, and one of my personal favorites. Also, I gotta say, of course, also Keith Hernandez also mentions how this kind of helped him gain some publicity because there's people who, of course, weren't alive when he was playing. They don't think of him as Keith Hernandez as the baseball player, but they think of him as Keith Hernandez from a Seinfeld episode, which of course would gain people who like baseball his attention. But of course he has people who joke with him and say, "I'm not going to help you move," or ask him again how what was like kissing Elaine, which again he said he hated it, but it was a fun little gig, of course. And we do, of course, see Keith again in the finale. But yeah, I had to sneeze. Sorry, but yeah, very good episode, very exciting episode. And again, the third disc of season 3's DVDs, man, all good episodes, like all really good ones. And the last disc even has some others that really stand out to me that I'm excited to talk about. So we'll get to that, of course, next. And I believe the next one, I think, is the Fix Up. That's a good one too. I can't really talk about that one, but that does it, guys. I've done 6 reviews tonight. I'm going to upload all 6 tonight. And, yep, that's going to do it. So, guys, what are your thoughts on both parts 1 and 2? The whole hour-long episode of The Boyfriend, The New Friend, the Keith Hernandez episode of Seinfeld. If you watched both parts of those reviews, make sure to leave hashtag I watched them both in the description down below, in the comment section down below. Guys, be sure as always to slap a like on the video, subscribe for more content on my channel, follow me on Twitter as well at DemandAirboy93. I'm checking out. I'll catch you guys later. Have a good night, get some good rest, have a great start to your week, guys. Peace out, everybody.